Unfortunately, while the military is stepping up, as they always do, there are others sitting on the sidelines, and we're standing in the way. If you haven't gotten vaccinated, do it. Personal choice impacts us all, our hospitals, our countries.
So that was part of the president's announcements this morning. He also said that he would be deploying more than 120 military medical personnel in 6 states, an effort to lessen the burden that we're seeing on hospitals that are overwhelmed by COVID. HHS data shows a record 155,000 hospitalizations from COVID-19 nationwide. That is over an 80% increase in the last couple of weeks. And of course, that puts a lot of pressure on the nation's hospitals. We're glad to be joined today by Pentagon spokesman John Kirby. Great to have you with us, sir. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
So let me ask you this about this. It comes down to, according to what we have here, 7 to 25 military medical workers spread across these hospitals. When did the discussions about, when was the Pentagon first asked to start to be able to provide these people?
We've actually been providing independent little military medical teams of about that size since the summertime, Martha, since July. And the president asked us if we could step that up and provide more just recently. And of course, we are now. He announced 120 that are going to go. We think that into February, we could have an additional maybe up to 25 more teams that are going to be dispersed around the country to help alleviate the burden on the civilian healthcare workers out there.
Is there discussion about setting up alternative medical facilities, tent facilities, the kind of things that we saw earlier on?
Not right now, Martha. Right now, the focus is on alleviating the burden for doctors and nurses in the civilian community. So there's no talk about field hospitals at this time. But look, the Pentagon has stepped up in the past and will continue to review options and consider all ways in which we can help alleviate the pandemic's effects on the American people.
Okay. I have a couple of other things I want to get to you with while we have you. And one of them is this report that just came out a short time ago on the Ayatollah of Iran's website, which appears to show a robot conducting an assassination plot against someone who looks a lot like our former president, Donald Trump. Are you aware, is the Pentagon aware of this? And what is the Pentagon's reaction to this video?
We've just recently been made aware of it, Martha, and I think we're looking at that right now. But look, this is of a piece of the continued malign activities that Iran continues to perpetrate in the region and the threats that they continue to pose to our national security interests. Again, without speaking to this video, we continue to see them support terrorist networks in the Levant, in the Middle East, certainly in supporting militia groups in Iraq and Syria that continue to attack our troops. So here at the Department of Defense, we're going to stay very focused on this threat and make sure that we have the capabilities in place in the region to defend ourselves.
You know, there has been discussions that they want to see the former president and the former Secretary of State, who we're going to talk to in a moment, stand trial for the killing of Qasem Soleimani. How does the Pentagon posture itself to react to this? And do you take these threats and this threat seriously?
We take every threat by Iran seriously because we've got troops in the region and they have families at home, and we want to make sure that they can protect themselves and to continue to do their job against groups like ISIS there in Iraq and Syria. So we obviously take the Iranian threat seriously. And again, these kinds of threats that they pose only underscore the importance of making sure that we're vigilant and we're ready in the region. It also underscores the efforts by our diplomats at the State Department to try to get back into the Iran nuclear deal. Because, look, no problem in the Middle East is easier to solve with a nuclear-armed Iran.
Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, has been fielding some questions on Russia, and I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about it, too, because it appears that the talks, obviously there's 100,000 some troops mobilized on the Ukraine border, Russian troops on the Ukraine border, and Russia wants NATO members to commit to scaling back our activities, military activities in Poland, in Hungary, and in the Czech Republic. Is the U.S. open to that in any way?
I think what we said, and I think it was said before even the talk started in Geneva, that we would be willing, if there's reciprocity on the Russian side, to take a look at our exercise regimen in certain parts of Europe to see if there could be some ways we do exercises a little differently. But it was never a guarantee. It was not something we put on the table unsolicited, and it would have to be met by some measure of reciprocity by the Russians, including them being willing to de-escalate the situation situation in the western part of their country and towards the eastern part of Ukraine, meaning to reduce some of their force posture. And we haven't seen that happen, Martha. They still have a very sizable force posture there with no signs of decreasing it in any way, shape, or form in the near future.
But would that have to happen first before you would consider any changes in our NATO presence in those countries?
We've been very clear that, first of all, NATO is a discussion for NATO, and NATO membership is a discussion for NATO. And we were very clear that there was not going to be a discussion of reducing troop deployments or troop presence in Europe. We were willing to discuss the possibility of exercises changing in scope and size and scale, but only if there was reciprocity on the Russian side, only if they were willing to do the same.
But the president said he would consider increasing our presence, our military presence in those areas. Is that still on the table?
We have made no decisions about troop deployments or troop posture. We have a very robust European troop presence in Europe. And as we've said before, never at any time were we going to throw on the table the idea of decreasing our troop presence in Europe. What we have said is if they incur again into Ukraine, and if our NATO allies want a boost and bolstering in capabilities around NATO's eastern flank, we would be willing to have that discussion, and we would be positively disposed to consider those requests.
Wendy Sherman, who is the lead negotiator, says that the United States is open to discussions on placement of missiles in Europe, though, that she would be open to changing our posture of those missiles in those countries. Is that something the Pentagon is okay with?
Only, again, this was an idea that was only discussed if there would be a reciprocal move by the Russians. This is not about a concession that would have been laid out there. We have ample air and missile defense capabilities in Europe. We still want to maintain those air defense missile capabilities. I think this was a broader discussion in terms of the strategic nuclear arsenal. And again, that nothing would have been put forth without a concomitant commitment by the Russians to do a reciprocal turn.
Just one more for you on this. Russia says that if NATO doesn't change their posture on Russia's western border, that Russia would consider dispatching military infrastructure in Venezuela or in Cuba. Would the United States tolerate a presence like that?
Yeah, so I've seen those comments. I can't speak to the veracity of them. What I would tell you is, number one, NATO is a defensive alliance. It's not about offensive activity against Russia. It never has been. It's a defensive alliance, and it's an alliance of the willing that's decided by NATO members. And obviously, without speaking to these specific claims by the Russians, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we're ready to defend this nation.
But, I mean, we all remember the Cuban Missile Crisis. Yeah. That's quite close to our border. So my question is, would the United States tolerate Russia's presence with military infrastructure, which is their term, in Venezuela or in Cuba? Would we tolerate that or not? We will do what we need to do to defend this nation and the homeland against threats by any adversary, Martha. I'm not going to hypothesize about this claim by the Russians. We will do whatever we can to defend this nation, and we obviously take Russian threats seriously. Is it your sense, based on these talks and the way they're going, that this situation is escalating? What it is not doing is de-escalating, Martha. And we haven't seen the situation, really come down to a level where we feel very comfortable. As I said earlier in my press conference, we're watching this very, very closely. We remain deeply concerned. We've not seen any move by the Russians from a military perspective that they're willing to de-escalate the tensions around Ukraine. Yeah. Well, the markets seem to be paying pretty close attention to what's going on. Sometimes that's one indicator, anyway, of what the world thinks of all this. John Kirby, thank you very much. It's good to have you here. I hope you'll come back soon. Yes, ma'am. Will do. Good to see you, sir.